Saat ini, kegiatan penelitian di berbagai bidang memiliki tingkat ketergantungan yang tinggi terhadap data-data penelitian. Kemajuan yang sangat tinggi dalam kegiatan eksperimen yang didukung oleh teknologi komputasi telah mendorong kegiatan menggunakan dan menghasilkan data dalam volume, variasi, dan kecepatan yang sangat tinggi. Dalam era open science, data penelitian yang dihasilkan memungkinkan untuk diakses oleh peneliti lainnya, sehingga mereka dapat meningkatkan integritas dan kredibilitasnya. Kondisi penyimpanan data penelitian di Indonesia saat ini masih dilakukan secara terpisah di masing-masing institusi dan dilakukan oleh peneliti secara individual, sehingga cukup sulit bagi pemangku kepentingan di bidang riset untuk melihat sejauh mana perkembangan kegiatan riset berdasarkan data penelitian yang dimiliki dalam skala nasional. Terlebih lagi, repositori institusi sebagai wadah penyimpanan aset pengetahuan saat ini baru dimanfaatkan sebatas menyimpan karya atau publikasi ilmiah. Di negara maju yang telah berkembang kegiatan risetnya, negara memiliki tanggung jawab dalam melakukan pengelolaan data penelitian melalui repositori nasional, seperti Australia dengan ANS, Inggris dengan UK Data Service, serta Belanda dengan DANS. Pengelolaan data penelitian dengan menyimpan pada media tertentu seperti komputer, laptop, atau eksternal hard disk kurang dapat diandalkan dan beresiko untuk rusak. Selain itu, ada resiko lain yang tak kalah berbahaya, yakni hilangnya media karena pencurian. Di mana hal ini sangatlah disayangkan, mengingat data tersebut adalah hasil kerja keras selama bertahun-tahun. Oleh karena itu, penyimpanan pada repositori institusi menjadi solusi yang paling ideal. Perilaku peneliti dalam melakukan penyimpanan data penelitian sangat bervariasi. Dalam kajian yang dilakukan oleh tim PDII LIPI, bahwa selama ini peneliti melakukan penyimpanan paling banyak pada media laptop atau personal komputer dan berbagai penyimpanan eksternal. Kondisi ini diperparah dengan backup data yang dilakukan semaunya. Dalam melakukan penelitian, seorang peneliti idealnya sudah memiliki satu perencanaan manajemen data. Banyak sekali manfaat yang akan diperoleh peneliti, institusi, maupun negara ketika bisa menerapkan manajemen data penelitian dengan ideal, yakni efisiensi. Ketersediaan data pada repositori nasional akan mengurangi kegiatan penelitian yang serupa. Safety. Berbagai risiko kehilangan data yang disebabkan oleh perangkat penyimpanan dapat diminimalisir dan juga merupakan upaya untuk melindungi hak kekayaan intelektual. Quality. Repositori akan membantu peneliti untuk menjaga kualitas data dan proses kurasi memungkinkan data penelitian terpelihara sehingga dapat digunakan kembali. Reputation. Seorang peneliti akan meningkat reputasinya saat datanya digunakan kembali oleh peneliti lainnya. Compliance. Kewajiban menyimpan data yang ditetapkan penyandang dana penelitian dapat diakomodir melalui repositori institusi. Pentingnya mendepositkan dan membagikan data jika dilakukan oleh peneliti terbagi menjadi 3 keuntungan. Bagi peneliti, dapat meningkatkan reputasi dan visibilitas penelitian individu. Bagi komunitas ilmiah, dapat meningkatkan kolaborasi. Dan bagi masyarakat, mereka akan mendapatkan akses yang lebih mudah ke dunia penelitian. LIPI, melalui Pusat Data dan Dokumentasi Ilmiah atau PDDI, menginisiasi kegiatan pengelolaan data penelitian melalui sistem penyimpanan data penelitian dengan nama Repositori Ilmiah Nasional atau disingkat RIN. Dengan kapasitas yang tak terbatas, RIN mampu menyimpan dan berbagi data penelitian perkembangan dunia penelitian. RIN, kunci kemajuan iptek Indonesia.
Hi, good afternoon everyone. The Honorable Speaker, Mr. Armin Straupe, and the Honorable guest, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Ramadan Karim. Thank you so much for being here. Let me begin by giving you a warm welcome to the RDM Research Data Management Webinar Series, Diversity in Science, hosted by PDDI LIPI. the Center for Scientific Data and Documentation, Indonesian Institute of Sciences, and cooperating with FPPTI, Indonesian Academic Librarian Forum in Jakarta, Indonesia. My name is Madia Reni Sulaiman. For those of you who don't know me yet, I am a Research Data Librarian in Indonesian Institute of Sciences. It is such an honor to join with you here in this event. And today, I will deliver this session by speaking English, but sometimes I will use Indonesian language in question and answer session. Thank you so much for your attention. First and foremost, let us hear a welcoming speech from our acting head of PDD LIPI, Mr. Hendro Subagio. Please, Mr. Hendro, the time and screen is yours.
Thank you, Madia Reni. Honorable Mr. Amin Straube from the University of Limerick, Honorable Representative from the Indonesian Higher Education Library Forum, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon from Jakarta, Indonesia. Good morning for our speaker who is in Limerick, Ireland. Welcome to all of you at the Research Data Management webinar series, Diversity in Science, which focus on the roles of research data managers in the university. Let us thank God Almighty for allowing us to gather today, although we cannot gather here in Jakarta, Indonesia, to meet face-to-face because of the pandemic. I believe we still have a strong desire to make this webinar beneficial for our professional development in the context of scientific data management. Distinguished speaker, guests, ladies and gentlemen, as the Center of the National Repository and Depository, PDDI, Center for Scientific Data and Documentation, has an essential role in managing research data and publication in Indonesia. In 2019, PDDI has launched Repository Ilmiah Nasional, or RIN, an Indonesian research data repository to support research data management and activities. The birth of the Information and Technology National System Constitution in 2019 has offered legal protection in scientific data management in Indonesia. This mandate is in line with PDDI LIPI program in research data management through RIN. For this purpose, PDDI focus on increasing its capacity and ability to become the Center for National Scientific Repositories in Indonesia by conducting a dialogue on the related topic with other institutions. We could improve the data management awareness and open science practice in Indonesia. Hopefully, this program's outputs could increase the participants' knowledge, especially academic librarians, to research data management and open science. And they can utilize RIN data first for their research data management platform. This event is organized by the Center for Scientific Data and Documentation, Indonesia Institute of Sciences, LIPI, cooperates with the Indonesian Higher Education Library Forum. This reflects our efforts in development of RDM in Indonesia. And last, we want to thank to Mr. Armin Stroop and ladies and gentlemen, good luck with the webinar, and I hope we could get many inspiration from this dialogue today. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Mr. Hendro, for welcoming our webinar today. So, Mr. Hendro will leave the webinar due to another activity in other place. It's okay. Thank you once again, Mr. Hendro, for attending and welcoming us. And without further ado, In this occasion, we shall have outstanding presentation from our prominent speaker, whom I believe shall enrich our insights and knowledge regarding the topic of the webinar, that is the roles of research data managers in the universities. On this special event, we'll gladly welcome Mr. Armin Straube, who will explore thoroughly about research data management implementation in higher education. Good morning and afternoon from here, Armin. How are you?
Yeah, good morning. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here, and I hope that my humble experience could lead to a little bit of discussion today.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us here, Armin. Because you are in Ireland now, we have 6 hours time difference, right? So it is 7 a.m. in the morning, if I'm not mistaken. Is it? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, well, if you don't mind, can you tell us about where you live now in Limerick? What kind of city it is? And have you been to Indonesia or Southeast Asian countries?
Limerick is a fairly small town with maybe 90,000 inhabitants. However, it is the third largest city in the Republic of Ireland. So Ireland is a fairly small country with 4.5 million people only. But we can say, okay, with our small town here, we are the third largest in the Republic. So yeah, so we don't have that many universities in Ireland, of course, for such a small country, but we are a close-knit community, and it's much easier in a small country to move a national agenda forward, but we are strongly relying on European cooperation as well.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I haven't been to Indonesia before. And Southeast Asia is not a region I've traveled so far. So something to be done in the future for sure. However, I had in my previous job in Qatar in the Gulf, I had a number of students from Malaysia, for example, and one Indonesian student as well. So yeah, so that's a small connection.
Yeah, that's great. I hope you will have a time to visit Indonesia soon, especially Jakarta. So Armin and I are in the same GLAM Labs group, and we also have similar interests to research data management. And that is why we invite him to share his experiences today. And with my pleasure, we should get to know more about our guest speaker, who is Armin Straube. We can see for his curriculum vitae. For the host, can you please display the resume? Or share the screen? Okay, I think I will try to share. I hope all of you can see this. So Armin Straube, you are an archivist, historian, and geographer. Wow, that's really interesting. And I think most of your work experience are related to research data management. So since November 2020, you are working as research data manager in University of Limerick, Blacksman Library. And you also did a teaching for library and information studies in UCL Qatar, and the head of data curation in the Qatar National Library. I see that you are also have been working in Germany as in the German National Library and as archivist in the Germany. Your education, most of it are from the background is the history, economics, archives, and also geography. And also the other skills, it is out of question because it is really related to research data management in general. And I hope you can share experiences more in this webinar. And for I think there are so many wonderful experiences, Armin, that you have done from your curriculum vitae, and we are so glad to have you here for sharing your experiences with us. Well, before you deliver your presentation, we should also get to know our participants, right? It could help us to monitor where they are today related to research data management. So we are going to have a polling here. Please, co-host, could you display it so we can start the polling from our audiences? Yeah. So there is a question, some question actually. What is your role in your institutions? You can be a librarian, researchers, academicians, students, or others. If you can see the polling, you can start to fill the polls. And the second question is, are you producing research data now? Because we are having our roles as librarian or researchers. We are conducting research every day, right? So we could be producing research data. And the third question is, are you managing research data? This is a hard to go question because most of us are maybe librarians. We are managing library collections, but how about research data? It's still a question in the Indonesian itself. The fourth question is, have you used RIN Data First, our Indonesian research data repository that you can access in rin.lipi.go.id? And the last one, have you used research data repository other than RIN Data First? Yeah, so half of our audiences already answered the polling. You can see that most of them are librarian, I think, 60% of them. And most of them also produce and manage research data. And only 15% of the audiences have used RIN Dataverse. I think we should make them know more about RIN Dataverse itself. And the 39% of them have used a research data repository other than RIN Dataverse. I think we can end the polling now. Yeah. So this is the result. We will share the result via email about the polling today. I think we can go back to our main event. And we have already got the helicopter view of our audiences here. Thank you for your participation in our polling. And back to the main event. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mr. Armin Straupe. The presentation time will be given for 45 minutes. And for the audience, if you want to ask a question, please use the feature of Q&A tab in the Zoom application. So, Mr. Armin, the time and the screen is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will now share my screen with my presentation. Rini, when you, if there are some questions in the question and answer box that are immediately interesting, then just please do interrupt me, and we can taking some detours or elaborate on some points.
Yeah, sure.
So let me get the slides up. So I hope everybody can see my slides.
Yes, we can see that.
Get myself sorted. Okay, so I have a second screen here where I also see the chat, so you can see if you can have a discussion there or start there. Okay, so I will talk about the role of research data managers in universities, but I will also take a little bit a wider look at the whole landscape in which I and my peers are operating as research data managers. To give an overview, I will start with what research data is and why we should care. But of course, we've already heard that in the beginning in this very nice 5-minute introduction video that we have been seeing. So I think I will repeat and emphasize a lot of the points made there. Then I want to go into a bit of a bird's eye view about open research and the current developments that are happening in open research, because we are talking about open access and open science for quite some time. But now in the last couple of years, there's really some movement in this, and I will have a quick look at that. Then I go back to research data proper in itself and look at what it takes to manage research data and explain the acronym FAIR that is at the center of research data management, the aim of making it fair, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. Then I will look at research data management services that are being developed in institutions, and we can probably expand on national level. And I have a few lessons learned and suggestions for next steps that we can then dive into in the discussion. So I will draw mainly from my current role as a research data manager at a medium-sized university here in Ireland. However, my own involvement with research data goes back further than that. When I was working at the German National Library in a capacity in a project that was dealing with digital preservation, we encountered that question, research data, what do we do with that from a digital preservation point of view? So I can also say a little bit about national strategies to handle research data. So the first topic I want to go into is what is research data and why should we care? Research data can be said is all the original sources or material, both digital or analog, that is created or collected to conduct a research project. So, or what I often like to say, all data that is analyzed to answer the research question. And that helps the researcher to think about all the different things that are there making up their research data, the big variety even in an individual researcher's care. So, and if you add all the layers of complexity that come with all these different disciplines and all the methods that are used in so many different disciplines, and then you come up with a very, very wide range of things of file types, of stuff that could fall under the term research data. So, and handling all this, preserving it, making it available, describing this is a tremendously complex task. So just from a look at the examples that I've listed here, it goes from blood samples to questionnaires to maps to photographs. And if we widen that even further, then all the stuff that is produced to handle these data, like the software, if you write some code to do something, if you develop some algorithms to handle data, if you do some models or visualizations, all that can be part of your research data set, increasing the complexity and the challenges that go along with it in saving it, making it available. What I try to get across when I do trainings with the researchers in our university is to make that distinction between raw and intermittent data. That is basically everything that you produce or that a researcher produces during their research. And all that data, that's not something that you casually share with somebody else. You're not very, researchers are not open about that, because this is basically their messy sandpit where they are trying to build their research sandcastle. And what we need to do as research data managers is giving the researchers everything they need for secure storage and backup, so that you don't have the data loss while they are doing their research. And we need to train the researchers to be able to understand what of all this that they are doing and creating and building is important for retention, sharing, publication. What of all this becomes part of a data set that should go into a repository, that should be as open as possible, should follow the FAIR principles. So we have these two things, raw and intermittent data, and out of that we sculpt, document, create a final data set. And that's what underpins the research and makes the research reproducible. And that's what goes into the repository. Taking a step back and having a look at the history on the handling of research data, we can, of course, go back as long as research was done in the same principle fashion as we do it now, 500 years or even further. Researchers have come up with a hypothesis, and then running experiments and then coming to conclusions. And of course, since these early times, people were using what we would term research data. However, only because research data is predominantly digital today, can we talk about retaining it and reusing it. This is also not entirely true. We have some data archives that were also already working in an analog fashion, for example, storing questionnaire answers in analog form on paper, and people were able to go back to that. So sharing and reusing research data is also not entirely new, but the scale that we are seeing and the potential that we are having is definitely something that comes out of the digital way that we are working now. So, and the big discussion about research data and retaining and sharing research data started about 15 years ago in force. Of course, you find examples of that way earlier. You can go back basically to the birth of the internet in the early 1990s. This was also an effort to connect research output at CERN in Switzerland. So these first browsers and hypertext markup language invention was basically an effort of to make a better research data management. However, in the wider landscape, the discussion started about 15 years ago. And we had then some examples like this, like the Guardian in the UK saying, give us back our crown jewels. So many tax money, effort funded by the public is going into the creation of research data or public data. And that should be retained, reused, made available somewhere. So this thinking, it costs money, it should be retained if at all possible and made openly available, is a couple of years old. Then there's this, the second aspect that comes into the discussion is that research should be reproducible and transparent. Here I have one example. Of course, you can find many more examples of a controversy around the University of East Anglia in 2009, basically. And researchers there were doing climate research, and one of their email accounts was hacked, and the conversation between different researchers were leaked to the press. And if you were reading these emails in isolation, you got the feeling that the researchers were taking shortcuts and were not really doing a proper research. And of course, climate change deniers were jumping on the conclusion, were saying this is all made up and so on. So what happened was that the House of Commons, the Parliament in the UK, were doing a deep investigation of the claims, and they found that the researchers were doing their research properly. However, in the report, they were stating that the scientists should have taken steps to make all the data, all the material that supports their finding available, so that such controversies wouldn't come up. So we have this idea coming in that it shouldn't be just a publication at the end of the research cycle. Stuff that underpins the research results, like the research data and also the code written, is part of the result of the research and should be made available. Another thing that happens is that publication of data becomes something, an act of itself. So we have now data journals in existence where peer review happens on the basis of the data set. So you can imagine somebody going on a year-long journey through the Arctic, gathering, this is an expensive endeavor, and the outcome is data sets that then hundreds of other researchers could draw upon. So, and a researcher who would focus on this would be basically a data scientist publishing the data set and let others then do the analysis of it. And that becomes a viable career path. And we see this better collaboration between people generating data and people using this for analysis. And we have these data journals now. So here the example, Nature, the journal, published a data journal called Scientific Data since 2014. However, of course, the majority of the data is underpinning research articles. So the importance of the research article is not diminished, but there are new forms existing besides it. So to sum up, if research data is published, it can be used to reproduce and validate the findings. It can just be reused for different research questions, and it can help the researcher to gain attribution and citation. It is a publication in its own right. So, of course, well, what we want to see is now to go from this old form of doing research where you create data, process it, analyze it, and then basically forget about it, to something like research data life cycle, where the results are preserved, accessed, reused, and used to create new forms of data sets. And this ties into a larger open research landscape. And we were talking about open science, open access for more than 20 years now, I would say. And for a very long time, not much has happened. The stranglehold that publishing houses had because their journals, which we librarians had to pay so much money for, or still have to pay so much money for, were the highest ranked, and researchers were not moved in any shape or form in publishing in these high-ranking journals, and nothing else counts because their career basically depended on it. So I'm happy to talk about a new approach that is being taken by the European Commission since a couple of years now in their research funding, because now they're saying we want to take a holistic approach in moving all the research into these open science, open research environment. So personally, I prefer the term open research over open science because I'm a historian by training, and we humanist, we do research, we are not science. So open research is a more inclusive and larger term. But of course, when the European Commission talks about open science, we feel that's exactly what we want to do in all forms of research, even if it's not termed science in the English language. And this commitment to these open science, open research landscape is something where you could say, is this just nice things that they say on in a grand speech, like here in 2016, when that EU commissioner says a systemic change in the way science and research are going to be conducted. But the EU was really following through with this, and we're saying we want everything that we fund to be open by default, meaning everything should be made available. Of course, in open science, open research, you can probably tell what the benefits would be. However, now we not only have these carrots, like it's better research, it's more efficient, it helps economic growth, it improves the transparency, it's better value for money and all that. Now they've also added some sticks. They are saying that you only get the funding if you comply with open research requirements. So, and that applies to both data and publications. So, and of course, when I say open by default and open access is central, there are, of course, possibilities to opt out of this openness for good reasons. So, for example, for research ethics reasons, protecting the privacy of your research subjects, or if you want to commercially exploit the results of your research findings, of course, you are not forced to make that openly available. However, you have to now give a reason for not being open, and that reason needs to fall into a certain category. And I just want nobody to see how messy my process was is not a good reason that would be acceptable under this new paradigm. So this is now all these nice sounding ideas are followed up with some serious implementations, and one of them is called Plan S. Plan S is a coalition of people who are trying to force the publishers to become more open in their open access in their handling of articles, basically. So, and for a long time, publishing houses have tried to go with hybrid models and all that. Plan S doesn't let them get away with it. They're saying we, the funders, so that's an international consortium of research funding bodies, the EU, of course, but also others. And there are a lot of national governments involved in supporting this with their funding agencies. They're saying, no, things really have to be open and also published in open access journals. Otherwise, there will be no funding. Yeah. So, and this aligns also with some efforts in how we measure the results of what good research is, and trying to kick out this notion that you have to publish your research in high-ranking journals. So here the hint would be the Declaration on Research Assessments, DORA, that is linked with this plan. And basically are saying, if you want funding from us, the funders that go along with this, then you can't use this as a measurement of how what good research is. So from the data point of view, activities that are happening is in Europe, the European Open Science Cloud. And here they're trying to get under one umbrella all the services for data storage, for data management, for analysis under one big umbrella. And people have jokingly said the European Open Science Cloud is neither European nor only open, and it's also not really a cloud. What they mean with this is that, of course, this is an European initiative, but it links out and is open to people from all over the world. So, for example, one element of this European infrastructure is Zenodo. And I hope you've heard that before. This is one of these repositories where you can very easily get a DOI for anything that you want to publish. There's no peer review, no quality checks, but it's an easy way of publishing something and put it out there into the research community. So, and that's one element of that big European Open Science Cloud, and there is no restriction of using this from outside the European Union. So Open science, as we've said, if there are good reasons to do something in a non-open way, then of course you can use these services and underneath that for that as well. So, and of course it's not all only cloud-based things. So European Open Science Cloud, that's the name of it, but there's much more happening underneath. And together, this really moves into a direction where open science, open research becomes a new normal way of doing this, widespread, not just in some disciplines, but across the board. However, with the European Open Science Cloud, it's still open days, and I myself, I'm a little bit skeptical how if all this hyperbole about connecting across borders and scientific disciplines will really work out. It sounds very good in theory, but we'll have to see. Yeah, so the hope is that with artificial intelligence, you can make these smart connections between data sets and so on. Let's see. So yeah, but there is going a lot of effort into it, and it is good that people are thinking in this on this larger scale about how research should work in the future. So just looking very briefly at the situation here in Ireland, we have a national open research forum where all the 7 universities and a couple of technical colleges are connected to each other, and this National Open Research Forum has published a national framework on the transition to open research environment. And this is not just a document, there's really a lot of activity underneath that. And we have working groups on all these issues here. And the Irish research funders are all on board with this idea of making data fair and openly available. So this means that not only our researchers that go for the European grants, but also the ones that go for national grants, for example, from the Health Research Board or the Irish Research Council, have to do data management plans and comply with this idea of creating fair and open data sets. So, and of course, this is then what led all the Irish universities to appoint people like myself with this title of a research data manager or a data steward or something or other like that, in order to support this whole agenda and help research comply with these requirements. So that as the big overview in what the landscape is. I now want to go a little bit further down into what managing research data involves. So if we recall the utility of published research data with reproduction of the results, the reuse of data sets, and the citation and attribution, we need to manage and plan for that. So, and research data management involves preservation, curation of the data while the research project is ongoing and for the long term to ensure the sustained accessibility. So we have the storage and handling while it's active, and then we have what happens with the finished data set in a repository. So, and the instrument that we use to think about this whole life cycle of a project and of data is handled in data management plans. So, and nobody no researcher is enthused about having to write a data management plan. So I'm always trying to make it a little bit sweeter and saying, if you follow all the criteria that are listed in a research data management plan, you will become a better researcher and your research will achieve a higher quality. So data management plans record what data will be created or analyzed, how that will be done, which methods are used. It has all these security aspects about how it will be stored and backed up and managed during the life cycle, and then what happens afterwards. So in our university, we try to catch researchers at an early point. So I try to get, for example, PhD students in their first year. That's my preferred target group for my trainings. Because when you plan all this from the beginning, it is not a hard thing to do. When you try to do this at the end of a research project, it might more often than not be impossible to get to a data set that can be shared, and that is useful. This is not only happening in the EU, we also see this in other parts of the world, in the US, Australia. Previously, I've been in Qatar, and the research funders there were also moving in that direction. So, and from what I hear from your introduction video, it's the same in Indonesia. Probably in different levels of commitment and requirements. However, this is where the journey goes to. These data management plans are mostly seen as something that people have to do because the funder requires it. And this is basically the stick that we are using. People come to me because they have to do it. I tell them how to do it. I review their data management plan. However, to make this really work is I try to get people away from this idea, this is the one document I have to write at some point, and saying, okay, regardless if you have to write it and hand it into your funder, it's also it's basically a checklist of things that you need to think about while you're doing your research. And if you treat it as a checklist and as something that helps you to not forget something in this complex life cycle. So this is me trying to sell this, because nobody likes to writing a lot of stuff for the funder and then also an additional data management plan. So, but at the heart of
Sorry, I think Armin got disconnected, so we will try to contact him first. So we will wait for a while for Armin. So if I have a little summary here from his presentation that he delivered about the example of how research data management is conducted in a global context. And the other thing is he gives that many policies in the organizations in the national or international scale are conducted in like horizon approach by EU, European Council, related to research funding, and how they ask the researchers to make the research data or the research publication open by default. I really want to ask about how the GDPR and sensitive data it is. And I think Armin is coming back.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I didn't know what happened there. I was talking, and a while later I noticed that I'm not even connected anymore.
That's okay. You can go back to your presentation, Armin. I just give a little summary about your first topic related to the policy of global contact on RDM. So please continue. Thank you.
Yeah.
We have
So
seen your
I'm
map. Yeah, so the screen is already on here. Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm not sure where I was, but I think somewhere with international funders requirements and so on. So I probably just jump into FAIR again. And that's the acronym that is at the heart of everything that we do as research data managers. And the idea is to make data findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And looking at what that entails helps us to understand what we need to do as research data managers to support research. So findable, the first one, that is something that is done via repositories. So, and of course, when you use the Dataverse, that is a brilliant system, and I'm a big fan of that. So a good choice. So, and this system, the repositories in general, give your data set a DOI or any persistent identifier so that it is citable. And that's the most basic and most important thing. Then it puts stuff up in the discovery portal so that it can be found. And also a good repository not only makes it available via their own discovery portal, but also pushes things to Google and to other discovery platforms and connects it to the net of data. So, and then the first one, rich metadata for description, that is basically the responsibility of the researchers themselves to supply enough information to describe the data set. And good documentation about what you did and so on. So that is something that we need to teach or that researchers also need to teach themselves. And that needs to be an ingrained thing in the research cycle, because data sets are only as good as their descriptive metadata and their documentation. Otherwise, they will not be interoperable and reusable. So accessible, of course, if we have something available via discovery portal and with a persistent identifier, that helps with the accessibility. However, accessible under FAIR doesn't need to mean it's openly available and you can just download with a click of a button. As I've said before, there could be some restrictions for ethical reasons or for commercial reasons. However, something would be considered fair if it is clear and transparent what the access rules are. So it could be that you need to sign something first before getting access to data, or you need to confirm that you will not exploit it commercially or something or other like that. So from a principle, you would still need to manage your data to an extent that it could be shared and that a third party could reproduce your results. However, you will then not openly share it for a good reason. So that means accessible. The last two, interoperable and reusable, are the ones that present a little bit more of a challenge. So interoperable means that the research data that you created is interoperable with other data, because you use community agreed formats, vocabularies for data, metadata. Of course, if you're doing something totally brand new that nobody has ever done before, then of course it will not be interoperable. But if there's something existing already, then you should take some effort to connect it and to make this interoperable, because only then we can utilize the promise of connecting data and having a large data-driven research landscape. Now with the pandemic going on, we can really see in real time how this interoperability of data helps us in combating the disease. So if people doing genomics hadn't come up with community agreed formats on how to decipher gene sequences and how to present these results, then the whole effort of creating vaccines, of tracking the disease wouldn't have fallen, would have taken much longer than that. So, and because the research community doing these genomic sequencing has these agreed formats and ways of doing it and works in an interoperable and open way, that was helping the scientific response to the challenge in a tremendous way. And that's only one of the examples where this interoperability of data shows its tremendous effect. So the last point under fair is reusable, and this means things like licensing. Yeah, am I allowed to use this? Under which conditions I'm allowed to use it? However, there are more aspects to it, like having all the information about the methods with which the data was created, so that somebody else can make a decision. Is that comparable to what I do? Can I compare these two data sets, yes or no? And they can only do that if they have the information. So, and on a higher level, if all this information is machine readable, so that people can automatically or with artificial intelligence pull data together, link data, and doing large meta studies about lots of data sets. So all that comes under this heading of how reusable is your data. So, and of course, this is not a yes, no a decision. This is a continuum. Yeah. So it could be reusable, but first somebody has to match it on a granular level, or there is something better than that, and interoperability is much higher because following a certain standard. So I will share at the end, when I share the slides, also this nice fair data checklist that ask a couple of questions. So this is something that I use in training. because it helps researchers to think about their data and saying yes or no to certain criteria, and helping them to make their data fairer, basically. So this graphic shows a little bit that we have really a lot of research data out there. Only a minority of it is managed, and even smaller part is managed according to the FAIR data principles. And this is where we want all the research data to essentially go at some point into this FAIR bracket. However, the distinction at the beginning that I was making, yeah, you have all these raw and intermittent data, and you have to make a decision what goes into this nicely structured final data set. And that FAIR data should go into a repository. And the sweet spot and the most valuable data is the data that is both fair and open. That's where the biggest value comes in. And this is where we want as much output to be. Open data that is not done according to the FAIR principles, I would question how useful that is. Yeah, it's available, but maybe not reusable. So to sum up the benefits of data management, and this is going back to what was nicely said in the introduction video, it's about quality and efficiency. Data management improves the research process. It's about security, not losing your data because of a flawed backup policy or something like that. It's about research integrity and the reproducibility of research. And it's about compliance, funder requirements. And all the other things, except funder compliance, was there for a long time. But the recent dynamic in the system is because funders are getting serious about that. So that's a game changer, definitely. And only because of these hard requirements are institution putting people like myself into this field. And maybe just to say how my position came to be. This was not that the University of Limerick was saying, "Oh my goodness, yeah, we are so open research enthusiasts. We just find some money to create a new position." Far from it. Of course, the university for a long time was in love with this idea of open research, but couldn't really force people doing that for the variety of reasons. And now that the funders are getting really serious about it, then the university needed to find the potential to appoint somebody supporting all this research data. And what they did was that when one subject librarian position came available, they were saying, okay, now this will no longer be the educational science, this will be the research data manager. And of course, this is a complicated decision for library to take, because we also want to get good services out there for all the subjects that we are doing. So now I have a colleague who needs to do both the health and the educational side of things. And of course, it's not ideal. However, there's no other way around it, because we have now so many requirements regarding research funding in regards to research data management, so that we needed to act. And this is happening across the board in many institutions in Europe. Okay, so that's about already taking a little detour, and going into the next one is developing research data services. So looking at what a data manager, or in most institutions, it's more called a data steward, is a position that is basically in the middle of everything. Yeah, we have, on the one hand, we have the researchers themselves, then we have the policymakers. I've talked about them at length, and then we have all the other support services that are already there, from IT, infrastructure, and ethics boards, and so on. So, and all of that needs to come together under this idea of creating fair data sets to get to a point where we can produce data that is worth something. So, and the role of the data steward is basically to get all this aligned with each other, and to get the policies in place to support the scientists of getting where they need to be to meet the requirements. So we see here something like GDPR, that's the data protection, the fair requirements, and so on, from the funders and the general legal side of things. We have all the service and technical infrastructure. So here we are talking mainly about the storage infrastructure and all the instruments and all that. That all needs to be aligned with this idea of we make this transparent and share it as part of the research results. And scientists, researchers need to learn a lot to be able to do that. So, and as a data steward, I'm teaching the researchers, get everybody on board in my institution and outside of the institution, so that all the policies align. So that's basically, in a nutshell, what a data steward has to do. Looking at this from a service model point of view, so this is from the Data Curation Coalition in the UK. They have identified a number of activities that data management in an institution involves. And we find the same things that we've seen in the previous slide again. There is the institutional policies and strategies, which should translate into business plans and be a sustainable thing. So we have we need to have the support for the data management planning, support for managing the active data, the storage, the security, the compliance with ethical requirements. Then we have the selection and handover. So that's the transition from the storage into the data repository. So looking at your situation, managing the active data would be in your institution. And if it goes then into the national data repository, then this data selection and handover process is a big step. If you have your own institutional repository, on the other hand, then maybe that is not such a huge thing and a lot of organization involved in that. So, and then of course you need to make sure that things are findable and can inspire new things. So, and all that is underpinned by advocacy, training, guidance, support services. So, and all that is basically championed by a data steward and built. Yeah, so that's what is part of the job description, to move all these things forward. So, and this puts the data steward in a position where there are lots and lots of dependencies. So looking at my own practice, I see that I deal with a lot of researchers, training them, doing workshops. So that's probably half of what I do, engaging with researchers, also reviewing their data management plans. So, and there are a couple of researchers that have basically a higher engagement, and sometimes that is called data champions. These are researchers in a department who are really engaging and amplifying the message about data. So, for example, we have some data scientists in our engineering department because they have some large instruments running, creating lots of data, and they have specialists handling this for other researchers. So, and of course, these are my go-to people, my data champions, and they amplify my message, hopefully. Yeah. So then I have the institutional management, the grant officers, and so on, getting these funder requirements into the institution and complying and all that. At the moment, I'm trying to get all the policies in alignment, because if you think about some ethics requirements that are saying, yeah, some personal identifiable data has to be destroyed at some point, how do we get a good delineation between what needs to be destroyed and what needs to be retained, so that this is clear for everybody involved and is on a sound footing. Then, of course, we have an IPR office because the university wants to commercialize research results. So, there is some discussion around how does that align with open access, open and fair principles. So, and here it is not either or, it is doing both and doing it in the right way. So a lot of discussions around policies and workflows. At what point do we want people to patent? At what point are things published? And that kind of things. So then with the GDPR privacy, that's a huge concern, and if we deal with personal data, there's a lot of policy alignment needed there. So, and then the people that I work most, besides all the other librarians, is the IT department, because they give me all the technical infrastructure, the data storage, the archiving solutions, the repository, and so on. So that's a very close relationship. And I'm basically also telling all the researchers about all the services that our IT department gives them to support their data management. So I was originally planning to go into my website. We can maybe do that in the discussion. I will just try to get my lessons learned over with, because time is moving quickly. Lessons learned and next steps. So here I just have a couple of slides to give you some, hopefully some inspiration on what to do if you want to move your research data management forward on the institutional and hopefully the national level as well. So the first thing is that you cannot deal with research data in isolation. There's no way. You need to collaborate as much as possible. So I've just talked about all the internal stakeholders. So running about getting policies in alignment, on an institutional level, or even on a smaller scale level. So a lot of the consultancy that I'm doing is about how a certain research project deals with their data management internally. So this is collaboration, discussion, having some workflows in alignment and everybody on board with what needs to be done for research data management. So then, of course, collaborating with the external partners. I've talked a lot about the funders, but equally important are the peers. So I'm talking a lot to other people with the same role in different institutions. We do this on a national level in Ireland. However, on a global scale, the go-to place is the Research Data Alliance. And there is no membership fee. You can just sign up there. And they have lots and lots of working groups in certain areas, and you can become member of those and see what is going on there. And this has helped me tremendously in understanding all that and seeing what is going on in research data world, basically. In dealing with researchers, what helped me most is to put them in a different frame of mind. So this is, in all my training sessions, I'm trying to get them away from being, this is my data and I'm the producer of the data. And I try to get them to look at their data from a reuser's point of view and get them to see the complexity of research data management. If they store it somewhere, it doesn't mean it's findable. Even if somebody else can find their data, can they access it? Yeah, or is it just on a USB stick somewhere? Yeah. If it's accessible, is it understandable? Is there documentation about it? Do they know what all the columns in a spreadsheet mean? Yeah. If they understand it, can they use it? Because the method is done properly, or because there is a license attached to it. So in my training session, I try to get people to switch the perspective and think it through from a data reuser point of view. And if researchers make that switch, then they basically understand all the requirements in a data management plan and understand why that is in there and why they need to take care of certain aspects of a data management plan. So the last advice is basically keep learning. I want to point out one initiative, and that's the CoData RDA Schools of Research Data Science. They are more geared towards researchers, and they usually last for 2 weeks. And they are done specifically with middle and low income countries in mind. So you can go in, get in touch with this CoData RDA school and organize an event in Indonesia. So that they would be very happy if they would have somebody to host it there. And the idea is that the people who were taking part in this, then becoming kind of a alumni network that are organizing further events and also spreading what they have learned. So research data management is, of course, an important part of it, but there's also a lot of technical things like machine learning, data visualization, and so on. So, and this is also something aligned very much with what I like to do, getting my hands dirty with the data a little bit and teaching. So half of my teaching is basically the research data management, and the other half is teaching the technical stuff. As examples, what you can do with the data once you have something that you want to reuse. Yeah, so moving researchers to a different methodological level as well. So that's the CoData RDA school. The other thing I wanted to point out is the carpentries. And we've already seen that the CoData RDA school is using software carpentry, and there are two other carpentries around called data carpentry and library carpentry. And this is basically ready-made lessons that you can take and teach, or just use to upgrade your own data skills. Usually you take part in some of these sessions, and they are run online these days, of course. Otherwise, they are also available to organize if you get the trainers in. And here's also the idea: taking part in the carpentry sessions first, then doing a train the trainer seminar, and becoming a licensed carpentry instructor. So this has helped, engaging in this process has helped me a lot in the way I teach technical stuffs, and also to learn things more myself. And these are all free resources, yeah. So this is not these courses are well, sometimes there is some fee involved to recover costs, but it's not a for-profit thing. So the final thing, advice is to make room for exploration and innovation. And this is something that we are working on at the moment, and I hope that you will have another talk about labs specifically at a later stage. The basic idea of a lab is to create a place, virtual or as a physical space, where people come together and look at the digital collections and the data that you have in your library, in your repository, and then using all the tools, the digital tools, to make new and innovative things with it. And this is something, if we create this in our libraries, then we can be a really innovative part of the research landscape in our institutions. So this is what I'm up to next. So I've already started with teaching the technical courses, and we have a nice fancy room with some high-spec computers that we want to use for this purpose. However, you can do this on normal machines. The principle of it is not limited to some fancy machinery. What you need is knowledgeable people that have done the training with CoData and with the carpentries, and then really making use of the data that you have. So my basically last slide is the key messages. Consider research data as a valuable, potential reusable resource. Help your researchers to change their perspective and to manage their data properly. And then think about what services, consultancy, and training you can offer in regard to data storage, documentation and metadata, all the legal issues, IP, copyright, and so on, and in regard to the publication of data. Dataverse at the Institute of Science is the answer in your case, of course. So I will stop sharing my screen now so that we can engage in the discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Armin, for your insight. And yeah, I couldn't agree more. Indonesia needs to highlight this awareness to research data management skills, of course, for researchers and then information professional. And it's an inspiring insight on how you deliver the programs and bring these important issues to the academic communities. It is an interesting approach too in questioning how we could provide services of research data to our patrons in library, especially academic libraries. I hope in the future we could see Indonesian academic libraries provide these services too. Thank you so much, very much again for your informative and interesting talk, Armin. Very well, ladies and gentlemen, now we come to question and answer session. I will pick some on the Q&A tab here. So we have a question for Ms. Arizuntriana. If you can see Armin from the Q&A tab, she is asking, she is an academic librarian from UIN Malang. She wondered if you also dealt with cultural or social challenges in implementing RDM in your university at Limerick, maybe in the earlier years of implementation. Some researchers that she knows is still holding the view that research data is their personal properties and they don't want to share them with others no matter what. So what do you think about it, Armin?
Yeah, so that is of course a big problem across the board, and this is not something that is going away. So we unfortunately don't have the situation that we're saying it was a big problem earlier on, and now it's getting better. Even people who are in principle agreeing with this whole idea of open access and open research, if it comes to the point where they're saying now publish your data, people getting apprehensive, and that is a totally normal thing. So I would never say, okay, you're old school and all your reluctancy is a bad thing in itself, because it is a hard thing to get from this messy thing that you do with your research when you're actively doing the research to something that you're proudly show somebody who say, oh, I understand the documentation. This is hard. It's not easy. So what I'm trying to say is I hope that people see the point. And if they don't see the point, then the funder makes the point for them. So they are forced to accept that. And that is because without the funders making this mandatory, we wouldn't be where we are. So that's the very basic thing. So, and if in Indonesia, if your funders are making this a nice to have, then it will not happen. Yeah, it needs to be a hard requirement. So this means people are grudgingly saying, oh, I have a deadline, I have the requirement. So, and then I have these friendly librarians helping me with it. And yeah, this is how it moves forward. And it doesn't become easier. It's just that people have less excuses if the environment is right. And then they need to put in the work in making it happen.
Yeah, thank you for your answer, Mr. Armin. So for our position in Indonesia itself, we have Indonesian law number 11/2019 related National System for Science and Technology. Specifically in the Article 40, we have a statement related to deposit data requirement, but not specifically bring about the publish and sharing of data. So we want to make the knowledge preservation of Indonesian scientific data. That's our goal. That's why when we deliver this research data management webinar or events, we always say to our audiences that deposit is a must, but publish and sharing is optional. You can, that's your choice to do that. Yeah, that's our case in Indonesia. So we also know that it's really a challenging stuff to make people to raise the awareness of research data management on researchers and information professionals too, because we need to upgrade their skills on this specific data management. Yeah, so we can go back to the another
Maybe
question.
to comment on that.
Yeah.
When I see where that reluctancy is coming from in sharing, is the if we are saying, okay, so one argument that comes very often is, I'm still not done with that data and I don't want somebody else to beat me to the chase. And this is a very valid point. And if you then say, okay, deposit the data and put an embargo on it, and of course it only goes live alongside your publication. Yeah, so that is something that I can address. However, the underlying thing that nobody really talks about is my data is messy and I'm too afraid to show it. So, and without saying this out loud, trying to help people becoming better. And that's why it's so important to catch people when they start out, and setting this as the requirement for the end of their research journey, and planning this as a deposit or a publication from the start. And yeah, so that's...
Yeah, that's really a note for us, because when we start from planning, it will be easier to monitor the progress of updated data, and it will not become messy as we have already now. So related to, if we can go back to the other questions, Mr. Joko Slamet, he asked about how do we classify the data that are valid? Do you also, in your position as the data stewards, are you give a validation of each raw data that you manage?
So this is something that I can't do. So our university has, I think, 16,000 students and a couple of thousand researchers. And I'm a historian and a geographer and also information scientist. So I have no idea about high energy physics or medicine, or yeah. So I cannot go about and validate. What I try to do is to do trainings about the principle of things, and giving examples on how people can do that themselves. But other than that, it's up to the research groups and their good research practice. In some universities, they're going a little bit a step further. So the best example is the Technical University of Delft in the Netherlands. We have, I think they have 8 faculties and they have 1 data steward each. So they hire a subject expert just for the data from 1 department. And of course, that kind of data steward can engage on a whole different level with the research that people are doing. However, from a funding perspective, that is not something that many institutions can do. Yeah, so some other institutions going a little bit of a different way. For example, the University of Cambridge has a little bit of a scheme called the Data Champions, where they are using early career researchers. They're still doing their own research, but getting a little bit of extra to being the champion in their area and their field, and they can do engage on a data level. So my own aim is also to engage on a data level, however, doing this as a librarian from a library perspective. So this is what I was getting at with the library lab. So there I will we want to make a space where people can engage with all kinds of data. And if they engage with our library data, like the digitized material that we have, then I want to get engaged as a librarian in exploiting that data in the research. So this means a small part of the data that we have, I also engage with because this is what I know and what I can do. Yeah. But I can't do that for everything, of course.
Yeah, that's the kind of a similar environment where in Indonesian Institute of Science, we cover so many disciplines. And we also have like a kind of subject data librarian, but they can't cover as many as we have right now because so many disciplines that we manage here. So yeah, the need of data stewards on specific domain is really important here too.
So when I think about what the future might hold for academic libraries,
Yes.
I think that at some point when you hire subject librarians, them being data savvy should be one of the criteria. So I could envision a future where you're not having a specific data steward that does everything. You have the subject librarian that are not only handling the publications, but also the data for a certain subject area. I think that is something that the future will bring, hopefully.
Yeah, I hope so too, because the profession of subject librarian are already common practice here in Indonesia, so it will help for the data management in universities. For the next question, there is a question from Miss Alfrey. She asked about, she asked about how to build the sufficient environment for researchers, both from academician and practitioners, since there is fund issue involved. Could you please answer this, Armin?
Yeah. So the question of additional funding is always something that comes up here as well, because sometimes funders also give the opportunity to get some extra money for research data management. However, I'm always a bit reluctant to say, okay, this is, you should do that or that from a funding point of view, because there is not, research data management is not separate from anything from the whole research process. It is ingrained in there, and also from a funding point of view. So this means when you're doing your research, you rely on underlying infrastructure that your institution needs to provide you with. So, for example, cloud storage or for your data and backup and so on. So, and this needs to, and the funding of these fundamentals, they need to be dealt with in a different way. It cannot be up to a data steward or a researcher to scratch their head to think about where do I get the funds for this. Unfortunately, the reality might be that you don't have access to that and no opportunity, and you need to go down that route. But the ideal scenario is that that this is just the basic thing that you have because you're a researcher and you need this to do it. So, and of course, when you have an institution that provides you with a repository and with support services, then of course you should be aware of that and feed into that, try to influence that and saying, okay, would be great if you could do this as well, and this is how we could create an environment where institutional, national level help each other and create these synergies to make things, because no institution can fund this by themselves. I would also advise you to also look beyond the national level, because for some sorts of data, you have specialized repositories that might give even better support for very specific data. And it for your national and institutional level means pointing to that, yeah, so that we have this international net repositories and infrastructure. So, and this is a little bit this idea of this European open science cloud. Yeah, you have all these different initiatives and they just talk with each other and they're linked to each other in order to make an infrastructure that each and every researcher can use and tap into.
Yeah, we also aware of about this, that there is insufficient for infrastructure and people who are going to manage the back office of the data repository, or who are going to stewarding the data. So in our case in Indonesia, because we are also managing RIN Dataverse, it is a national scientific repository that covers so many scientific disciplines. We, because we are fully support the open science movement in Indonesia in the global context, we provide free services for researchers or any institution that are not sufficient enough fund in providing the services of infrastructures and other things. Because if you know data first, I mean, we can connect this as a subsystem to other institution, then we can just make it yeah, manageable within the other institutions itself.
Yeah,
Yes.
that is exactly that what I really love about the Dataverse, that you just centrally manage it, and then each institution gets their branded version of it without having to deal with the setup of the system. And from an institutional point of view, it is so important that you have your institutional brand, that you're showing that you have a unique contribution to this open research landscape, because if you're not visible, then of course funding dries up and so on. So yeah, having a system in place where you centrally manage the setup and then still enable the visibility for all the participating institutions, that's a perfect solution. Yeah.
Yeah, is it the same case with a European Science Cloud that you mentioned before?
Well, the European Science Cloud is not really just a repository. There are lots of repositories underneath it, and lots of other services like these ORCID services, or yeah, so federated access, all these storage. Terabyte storage, high frequency, and so lots of different services. And the idea of it is to bring this all under one umbrella and see that moving data from one service to the other and works seamless in that system. So that's the European Science Cloud. So it would be a bit larger than just a repository.
Yeah, okay. We also have the KISS, but it's one data policy, but it's still on progress. Maybe we can talk about it further later. But we can go back to the other question. Mr. Wardiono asked about what had you done with the analog data? Did you digitize them? What kind of digitation for what kind of data? And what best practice that you have done for long preservation of the digital data or archive?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, thanks. Very good question. And there are probably two strands I need to go in there to answer that. The first one is the research data management part. For the research data management, we haven't, as a library, we haven't done anything with analog research data. So what we're basically saying here is we have these central services and they are all digital services. So the moment that you digitize your data, you can make use of these digital services. But however you digitize that's your own thing as a researcher. So we don't offer any support there. The second strand is that as a library, we of course have a lot of data ourselves, and we have a digitization lab and some small-scale program to digitize our special collections. And we've digitized in the past as well. So, and what we are trying to do there is to make this data available as data sets. So, and here we have, but this is not for a researcher walks in with their analog research data and we do that. It's our special collections. So of course, there's always a little bit of collaboration with researchers so that we digitize for researchers and for certain research projects, but this is always focused on our special collections. So, and in that stream, we do digitize and make that available as data sets. So that's that strand. So, and for best practices for digital preservation, this is something where a repository, whatever repository you use, should follow best practices in digital preservation. So what we do have, so here at the University of Limerick, we are, as so many other institutions, basically between systems. We have an old DSpace repository, and we are not convinced that this will give us a lot of traction in the future. So we are at the moment tendering out a new institutional repository, which will give us much more flexibility for research data as well. I would have loved the Dataverse solution. However, the requirement from the university is that we want to have one institutional repository that handles both publications and data sets. So, and that's probably not the Dataverse solution. Yeah, so but we will see what it ends up. But my role is to make sure that whatever solution we will have in the future will be one where data can go in, but also can come out in nice packages. So digital preservation best practices would be to think about the whole system that you have set up in a way that every single bit of that system can change or needs to change over time. And if you think, okay, if I switch repositories, in which formats do the stuff comes out? How is my metadata structured? And is that a seamless process? So I'm relatively optimistic that we have all the basics covered here, mainly because we have publications in our institutional repository, so they are fairly easy to handle from a digital preservation point of view. So, and for research data, what we are doing at the moment is that we point people to specific discipline-specific data repositories, and for everything else, we point people to Zenodo. And on Zenodo, we have a research community so that we have a little bit of this institutional branding, and people upload it there, and then it's in the background these European-funded trustworthy repository considerations in the background. So, but good digital preservation also depends on your choice of file formats and so on. So this is part also of the data management training to understand a little bit the longevity and the benefit of using open, simple, well-documented file formats versus some arcane programs that belong to one company and so on.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Armin, for your answer. I think the question for Ms. Ria Aryani related to data integration is already answered here. That how can we draw the line together for our research data related different institutions? Do you want to elaborate more about this, Armin?
Yeah. So yeah. Let me just read it and. Yeah. Well, so I think it's probably more not so much uniting everything in one repository. It is more creating an ecosystem with services geared towards specific use cases. And so I could imagine that a social science repository can add value in making social science data interoperable to each other. So, and one institution doing both social science and maybe engineering puts their data into that specific social science repository, and the engineering data in some other repository. So, and the unifying layer would be that the discovery services about that are unified, but maybe the underlying services are in different institutions more who can give more support to specific kinds of data. So, and on the national level, you have to figure out who does what in that emerging ecosystem. And how do we make that work for everyone in the country?
Yeah, okay.
And there is, and of course, there is this a niche for simple small scale data that you have then in your institutional repository. Yeah, so to
Because we have also many research institutions in Indonesia, and recently the research institution will be combined in one big institution. So the integration of it will be like quite a homework of data and publication that they have. So I think it's almost at the end of the webinar session, Armin, but we want to see how your view from today's event. So we arrange another polling for reviewing it. Please do co-host can display the second polling that we have here. Maybe Mr. Rizal or Mr. Cahil. Okay, I think I will try to launch the polling here. I hope it's already launched. So we have 3 questions here. Do you know more about RDM from today's event? Because our main audiences are from academic libraries. So I hope from this event you can get a lot of insights, new inspiration, and new innovation to be conducted and implemented in your institutions. And the second question is, will you consider providing research data services in your institutions? Yeah, so people can just provide it, or maybe because you are researchers, you can go to the next question. Will you consider using research data services in your institutions if it is available? And the last question is, will you participate on our RDM webinar series in the future? We are going to have to cover so many topics related to research data management in the next series. And because we are going to hold a frequent series to support Indonesian Law Number 11/2019 in preserving scientific knowledge. So please wait for our next series of events when we can explore more about research data management in the global context. I think we can end the polling here now. You can see that many people have got new inspiration from today's event. So I hope it's beneficial for you. And about providing research data services, many people are considering to provide it and also using it. And some people are going to join the next event of RDM webinar series too. I hope this is conclude the event now. Well, thank you for those who already joined the polling. But before we end the event, I think we have a little, yeah, there was a message from the chief of Indonesian Academic Librarian Forum, but I haven't got the message yet. We just want to know about the next action that we are going to have with the forum here, because the Indonesian Academic Librarian Forum is the way we can introduce research data management and make the universities to implement it further for preserving the scientific knowledge, focusing on data. So I think that's a wrap up of our talks today. We would like to say thanks again for you, Armin, for your informative and interesting presentation, inspiring answers in our discussion, and to audience for your active participation. Hopefully the presentation will be beneficial for everybody. On behalf of the committee, Mr. Cahyo, Mr. Rizal, Ms. Untari, and Ms. Rulina, thank you all for making time to join us here today. It has been my pleasure to also moderate this event. I wish you all a pleasant day. I close this webinar series today officially. Thank you and have a nice weekend. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Armin.
Thank you very much for having me, and Ramadan Kareem, and
Yeah, Ramadan Kareem.